When you can think the unthinkable, one of two things happens. You either go crazy, stop doing it, or become a mystic. Yeah, I know that's three, but you also know that mystics don't count. Everything that man does is natural, no matter how unnatural it may seem in the short term. A more active mind can be exhaustive where others are merely exhausted. If men face the obviousness of point-blank reality too easily, the necessary game of progress would end too quickly. If you don't stop at two, anything can be understood. The mystical was the original inspiration for the concept of originality. Last time you heard it mentioned that on planets that have atmospheric pressure, that the trick to good thinking is to not be too specific. There is a underlying operational reality to this, even amongst the ordinary. And we're back to this situation that verbally, that is up to the level of consciousness where the mind operates. There is no general knowledge of it. If there was a general knowledge, if someone tried to make this widely available, no one would see impertinence to it, and etc. And so it's not just a matter that some sort of collectively unconscious awareness, all of that reflects the same reality that I'm speaking of. But operationally, there is an awareness to the advantage to less specific thought. It's never analyzed, not in this way, because this way is far too point blank. But you people got the faces and the brains for it. We won't go into what that means. And some of us in particular appreciate it. The trick to good thinking is to not be too specific. That is certainly, in that condensed, straightforward version, is not intended in any way for the general public, not because it's a great secret, but again, if you gave it to the general public, pearls before swine would look like some sort of cocktail party compared to this.
Yeah.
That always sounds too martyrdomish. 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 It would really be casting pearls out, and there's a bunch of swine around, and they never even notice it. It's only the ordinary that come up with some great idea, and then it gets ignored, and they go, well, that's what I get for casting pearls before swine, which insinuating that they got no appreciation. That, you know, everybody else is so dumb, as pictured by swine, dumb oxen and stuff. They'll come over and see something that shines, and it was a pearl or diamond. They go, what is that? You know, go pop and crush it. And the people who were prophets in their own time, before their time, I think they think of it, they go, well, that's why I wasn't appreciated. I cast my pearls before those who wouldn't appreciate it. Or couldn't appreciate it. No. It's not that. It's that they don't even notice. It's in two different realities. But back to where we were. The trick to good thinking is not to be too specific. And there is an awareness of this operationally, never analyzed, never talked about, for very good reason that we've just mentioned. Because they're all dumb oxen. I just said that wasn't it. But said in the book to always open with a little humor, and you'd get the crowd's attention. They'd be more likely to buy your program and the books and the tapes afterwards in the lobby, if we can ever afford a lobby. It gets to be a catch-27. I can't sell the books and the tapes without a lobby to tell you to pick them up later after the lobby, and we can't build a lobby onto this place until we sell some more, till we sell some of the books and tapes. The trick to good thinking is not to be too specific. That would be intended in that direct version to a small select group of people on this planet. But everyone has what I was referring to as there's an unknown awareness of this operationally. And I will give some examples. It accounts for the greater popularity of the arts than science. No matter where you go. And unless, of course, you are in the scientific community, and when you're at the heart of any vested interest, you have no real position from which to draw any examples, much less conclusions. But other than the scientific community, it's a known fact. There are even jokes made. People staying around bars, ordinary people, middle-class people, people with college educations will make some joke about how, well, I forgot all the math I know, or, well, you know how scientists are. I don't know how the hell this thing works, but it works. In other words, many times outright insults to science, professions of total indifference, even from the intellectuals of society, to kind of backhanded compliment via insults. Like, well, you know how nuts people are in the sciences, or nutty professors, absent-minded intellectuals, you know, that whole crowd. It also accounts in part, in very large part from a certain view, for the attraction of religion and all so-called spiritualistic explanations of existence. Does anybody follow this? Because they are anything but too specific. It is made plain that the arts are the greatest reflection of humanity, that the arts are the mirror by which we can judge how humane humanity is, by which we can judge the progress of civilization. That is very common. You very seldom hear it stated in a similar manner in regard to science. And yet we'll assume we have no vested interest, but on the basis of what we're discussing here, you could take a much more defensible view and say it would be the sciences that would qualify, that should be plugged into that. If we're going to judge progress, how are you going to judge progress? We're going to say that music now is that much better? If we're going to talk about the arts, for instance, that music right now is that much better than it was in Beethoven's time, or that art right now is much better than it was in Titian's time or Rembrandt's time, that drama is really that much better than it was in Sophocles' time. Has it been changed that much? But if you look at science, including technology, it changes drastically in 20 or 30 years. Nowadays, even faster than that. But the arts, to say that there is the reflection, the humanities. And what is that? Using the kind of diving board and framework that I'm trying to get you to consider tonight, it is a much less specific detailing, reflecting, observing, notation of human existence. And religion being a great example. I mean, how much less specific can you be than we're talking about the ordinary, not any sort of internal mystical attempts, but just ordinary organized religion, as practiced, professed, and enjoyed and embraced by humanity in general. How much less specific can it be? We all know that they will come up with some dogmas that as long as somebody wrote a script, somebody can say, well, God does not want you to drink alcohol. He does not want you to eat brockwursts with the skin on them. It says so right here. They can say something like that. But if you get specific, as far as it being an explanation, it is not as specific as science would be, even though science could say, well, the purpose of life is not our problem. That's beyond our area of interest. But in science, the defining element, or one of the real crucibles of what is science, is it is verifiable, it is reproducible, it is exact, it is predictable, and the arts are anything but that. Religion is anything but that, which is one of the reasons you might also see that rituals and dogmas are the key element in religion, because the information, the entertainment for here is so inspecific that if it were not for something else, if you look at it from a certain kind of view, how else would religion keep its act going? How would it stay in business? If we're back, recall you've already point out the dual possibilities that everything that humans do is either entertainment, that is food, but entertainment for either the body or the mind. It's one or the other. If you looked at religion as being a form of entertainment, which it is because you can survive physically, the bio survival of man is not hinged upon religion. So it is entertainment for the mind. But if you go there looking for a specific and say, I always heard that religion was in charge of explaining the nature of life, and the religion says, yes, we are. And you say, well, what is it? And they go say, well, hold on there, Bunky, wait a minute. Because they can't tell you with a straight face, sober. I was just pointing out, once you, on that basis, if you see religion as being a form of entertainment for the mind, and you see that the professed, the playbill, that is religion, saying, well, here it is, appearing tonight, appearing in your lifetime, appearing in this reality is Catholicism or Christianity or whatever, and you go, oh, good. Maybe the subtitle of the show playing. Nowadays, most of them have a subtitle. All good Broadway shows. Ain't a good show nowadays. Even rock concerts, a tour. Genesis. Level, I don't know. You know what I'm talking about. And they'll say religion, Buddhism. The soft answer to life. Or whatever. And so you go. But the entertainment for the mind, if you're looking for it specifically, that is, all right, what is it? They go, well, wait a minute. And they don't have it. They'll admit they do not. And I was just pointing out that is one of the key, it's why rituals is one of the key elements of religion, of holding that act together, because they say, well, go do so-and-so. And it is comfortable. But notice it is no longer entertainment for the mind. It is more than that entertainment for the body, which is what ritual is a kind of territorial comfort. That, I may be lost, but I won't think about it. I'll light some more candles. I'll bow some more. I'll do some more warrior beads. I'll do some more, something or other. You could take any part. I could just leave it with you and say, consider yourselves. What are the examples in the civilized world of man, the intellectual world of man? Anything that's not absolutely necessary for the survival of the body. Then what other examples could you find that do fit what I'm detailing or trying to get you to consider, that there's an operational sense that the best way to think is don't be too specific. I was going to say, what other examples could we find in the civilized area? I can go ahead and answer for you. Any example you can come up with. Anything you think about. Any form of mental entertainment. If you start from the basis, is it mental? Is it entertainment for the mind or entertainment for the body? Food for the mind, food for the body. If it's for the mind, then you're going to find that in some way it will not ever fulfill the stated playbill. Religion, psychology, social programs, science, art. That's why I said it was sort of a trick if I said, well, think of your own. Because anything you think of will fit. But also notice that help keep, it's the kind of friction needed to keep the ordinary parade going, because since none of them can succeed, you have again the ability that you got at least half the people criticizing the other half at any given time. And anytime you blink your eyes and look back around, the half that was criticizing, the 50% over here was criticizing the other 50, it switched and now they're criticizing them, so it doesn't matter who. But they know not to be too specific. They know it without knowing it. It is only certain kind of people, only a few people, I'm insinuating people that be interested in such as this always, that can see the reality of that and see the use in it. There's also, one you heard tonight, it said that ordinary men cannot see the obviousness of point-blank reality too easily, or else the game of progress would end too quickly. Many times you've been able to hear, we'd mention my little fictitious kid last time and pointing out, in a sense, the folly of him saying to psychologists, greatest ones in the world, the fathers and mothers of psychology, the greatest exponents today, just picking them out. And I went through the one of, they decide the very first school of psychology, to study man, what's the first thing they do after getting a grant, of course, is, well, send after 14 dozen white mice, get somebody to build us some little mazes and some little wheels, and get us all kinds of graph and paper and stuff to do statistical research on, and some clipboards so we can go out and poll people. And the little kid turns to the father of psychology, if there had been such a person, and say, all right, your purpose, you're calling psychology, is going to be the study of man. And he tries to give him some crap about, well, let me give you the root words from the Greek or Latin where psych. Nah. The kid said, it's a simple question. Your psychology means you're going to study man. And the kid says, well, all right, yes. And the kid says, you hadn't thought about just staying in your room. I mean, you are a human. You're a homo sapien. Well, yes. And your purpose is study man, and the first thing you want to do is get plenty of white mice to study. You hadn't thought about just staying in your, oh, get out of here. All right, that sort of thing. I know it can sound silly. Well, the reason it can sound silly, because it's true. So what can you do besides kind of laugh? Now, there's a lot more you can do, but we won't go into that. That costs extra. Real extra. Now, I don't mean you owe somebody. It just costs real extra. That's the kind of obvious I'm talking about, obviousness. Or that religion doesn't work, psychiatry doesn't work, penal reform doesn't work, any kind of reform doesn't work. In a sense, nothing works in the civilized world. That is, from here up. From here down, everything works, if you're ordinary. Which is why health is such a hobby. I'll save that for some other time. But that is why healthy people find health to be such a hobby. It is entertainment in a sense for both. Imagine being sick without actually being sick. Well, to see large segments of the newsprint and the electronic media is taken up. I bet in every news program nowadays after crime, which is surely the first, I bet if somebody did a statistical survey, I bet health is second or third, the most popular or the most takes up the largest percentage of reporting. It's health news. But ordinary people sit there and they say, major breakthroughs in breast cancer. And you'll see men go, didn't mean to shock you women. Anything. That's right. There are now new treatments for Gruber's syndrome. And a man goes, I don't even know what the hell it is. But it's like, well, he's sitting there and you're healthy, but to hear about things, major breakthroughs that they can now do such and such kind of surgery, not only without cutting you, but you can stay at home and not even show up. And people... Nothing, in a sense, nothing works, is where we were, as I wanted you to consider. Adam said, if men, I think the way it went, if men face the obviousness, but it also is saying that this is why they can't, but if men face the obviousness of point-blank reality. Now, we're not talking about that ordinary give and take and push-pull of the tango floor of people criticizing religion that are not religious. I don't mean that. They just notice the obviousness that religion cannot do what it says, but wait a minute. Nothing can. That's what no one can face. An atheist can say, well, yes, religion doesn't work. But then you say, well, atheism doesn't work. And he says, hold on there, partner. It's not that. It's not criticism. But it's the obviousness that nothing works in the civilized world for a very good reason. Because to work is to be dead. To work is suicidal. That's what a different way I'm trying to get you to tonight. That if men face the obviousness of point-blank reality too easily being sort of an inside joke, even though you didn't laugh, too easily. Or you could say too quickly, but kind of mucks up the balance of the rest of the sentence. If ordinary men face the obviousness of point-blank reality too easily, then the game of progress, the ordinary march, the evolution of humanity, but the game of progress would be over too quickly. So rather than just using as an example of me pointing out that psychology does not work, psychiatry doesn't work, medicine doesn't work, I should extract that. It is still too close to the body, and it can almost work in the same sense that you can almost get your car fixed at some garages. But into the areas that are more easily observed to be primarily based in the mind, psychiatry, religion, they do not work. But the reason men cannot see it, not the criticism, but the reason that men cannot just simply turn around and go, wait a minute, psychology or psychiatry does not work. It's a side trip. Well, we'll probably end up there anyway. But pointing out that psychiatry doesn't work. As a concrete example of just many, but it's shown up in your lifetime, it also has to do with why things do not work on a less specific basis is why men have unanswerable questions is the same thing. But here's one of the questions. How about all the questions about the basis of mental problems? We're not talking about genetic physical brain damage, but people that real so-called psychological problems that are not induced by through physical damage or through actual brain damage. And that there seems to be no cure. Just hit or miss, and they give it their best shot, and psychiatry will admit that all we can do is work on it, and it's prolonged, and there is no guarantee, and yet there are things that they know will work. But it's also tied to the general statement of where do the problems come from, or the general question, and that always hinges on, well, is it environmental, or is it in some way genetic? And if he's not got brain damage, how do you account for the fact that we've been treating them here in this little small town, this hospital, this clinic? We've had 3 generations of people severely depressed. In their home life, they don't seem to mistreat their children or treat them that much differently than their neighbors. How do we explain that? And they can't. They don't have enough statistics, they say. And they say, well, there's no way to actually cure people like that, when it's not true. They even know how to cure them. Drugs. There was even one, it's a little stranger, or maybe a little more interesting, it's not strange, was somebody stumbled upon a few years ago that it's a combination between a psychiatrist and a physician somewhere in a hospital. People who had been, some way this psychiatrist or the guy in the the ER, some way put it together. What they came to was people who had been in accidents of some sort and were rendered unconscious for a considerable length of time. And they started stumbling across the fact slowly, they said, that people who had been under extensive psychiatric care with, clinically diagnosable neuroses or psychoses, if they were rendered unconscious for a period of time, like several months, and they woke up and they were just almost cured after being 20 or 30 years in analysis. Of course, not being too hasty, they spent, 8 years. One of them, they got very interested between the two they did, and they started combing records and checking other hospitals. And anyway, they tracked down enough people who had been clinically considered to be real clinically serious cases of mental illness, psychological problems, who for one reason or another had been rendered unconscious for some period, 2 months. They came up with some figure. And then they got somebody to try it. They volunteered and they put somebody under anesthesia and kept them there under controlled conditions, fed them, kept them healthy. They had been like severely depressed, almost suicidal, and they kept them asleep for like 2 months, and the person woke up and they didn't recognize him. His family did, and he was all right. He was cured. That made the papers enough, one night. See, none of you have ever heard of it, but it made the national newsprint. Of course, they weren't too hasty, like, well, now much more work needs to be done. Of course, they didn't come and ask me, I could have told them before they even figured that out. And some of you should know that. The body, we're talking about something else that the body knows, or that humans know, because it is too specific for the mind to know. But how about, again, if you're just fairly normal to start with, and something does happen that really adversely affects you. Let's say a parent dies, somebody you're really close to. People know this, and let's say you don't go drink and this and that. What do you want to do if you're just an ordinary person? You want to sleep. And most of you should have been through some form of that. But that's about, unless you do go drink or do something, or crack up, you just go, leave me alone. And you'll sleep and sleep and sleep, and very often, we're just talking about the normal run of life out there in the street, that your friends, other family members may finally come around and visit you and bring you a cake or something and say, listen, you've been here in the house and we're worried about you. You hadn't been out of the house. We hadn't seen you in 2 weeks since your husband died, or Uncle Fred, whoever it was. And that you're actually doing the right thing. Again, we're not talking about somebody out of the mainstream. We're not talking about somebody that's already depressed, etc. An ordinary person. What you want to do. And we're not talking about a physical there. We're talking about something that was a non-physical trauma. What you want to do is sleep. And, as always, I'm playing with reality because life knows what it's doing. It doesn't need me. But it's like a ball of kind of silly putty that it doesn't want anything cured. But if we took what is now what ordinary people call people with psychological problems, not the really insane, but just what they say, people that have problems. They can still get around in life, and they're ambulatory, and they can deal with their family, but they feel like severe depression, that sort of thing. If life really wanted them cured, of course life would do it, but they could have checked with me, and I'd say, all right, put those people in hospitals, put them under anesthesia, and put them to sleep. I don't know. I never really thought about it to a specific. Put them out 2 months, and then wake them up and see how they are. And I can guarantee you that just would be close to 100%. We're talking about almost cure, not treatment. That the people wake up and go, wow! And they'd walk out, and that'd be it. You'd never hear from them again. But notice what I'm trying to get you to see is that they stumbled on it. They're doing it all the time. Not in ordinary, because life just lets it happen. Like I said, somebody can wander off the parade for a minute and go, wow, look over here, there's a wider street. And it's one person and 6 billion other people are marching along, and at any given time, 3 billion of them are bitching about it. And there's always that tension going on in the main parade. And just one guy wanders off all the time. It happens. For whatever reason, he just wanders off, or he takes some kind of drug he's never seen, or hits his head. And he comes back and he says, did you know there's a side street down here? We've been going down this main thing. Over here, it's a lot prettier and it's wider. Right. So 6 million people are going to stop and go, wait a minute. He could be right. Hold your breath. You know it's not going to happen. So that's what I mean. It's not a surprise that it doesn't work. But what I'm just pointing out, just assume I'm telling you the truth, that ordinary, whatever that would be, the middle class, middle of the road, people with psychological problems would be right at the point of 100% cured. To put them to sleep for an extended length of time, and then wake them up, and they'd be all right, and that's it. No drugs, no nothing. And notice, they even stumbled on very close. They had enough figures that they were excited. I can tell you could read it in the print. These 2 doctors like, ooh, we may be on not to just some sort of prize, but we may have actually found, believe it or not, no surgery, no drugs, a cure for all psychological problems. Just sleep. It was good for 24 hours and then zits. Nothing. You never heard of it again. Nothing. That's one. The more obvious one, if you want to deal with, consider another example of why men do not deal with the obviousness of point blank reality, as far as I know, well, I'm sure it is by now, every known, again, just the ordinary psychological problems, they now have enough drugs that they can stop the symptoms, which is a cure, of every known form of psychological ill. Drugs. I mean, it's a known fact. Do they do it? Obviously not. How do you explain that? Of course, don't try. They can explain it. What I'm asking, do you understand it? They're down now. They're so desperate, in a sense, they're down to now debating the moral questions involved. Of course, we can make fun of that and say, yeah, the moral questions that psychiatrists going, wait a minute, I spent 12 years going to school, and I got all these people paying me $200 an hour to come here and lay down and talk to me, and now some detail man working for $200 a week from a pharmaceutical house comes by and tells me, he said, do you realize we got this new drug so-and-so, and they've been testing it in a lab down in Mexico City, and 2,000 people suffering from such and such form of such and such subdivision of schizophrenia, 2,000 of them, 100% cure rate in 2 days. They all walked out. All the hallucinations, all their problems, everything stopped. and you're waiting for him to go, hey, well, send me over cases of it and I'll give it to all my patients and then they can leave. See, that would be an easy shot. It's not because it's a conspiracy. It's because life doesn't want it changed that drastically. But what I'm saying is, the debate even now is, there's some kind of postmodern school of analysis in general. It's been going on, well, ever since Freud started, but now I think it even has more steam to it. Like perhaps we're on the wrong track. Perhaps the day is coming that the whole field, the whole school, the enlightened new view of psychiatry and the treatment of mental ills is taking a slightly different, yeah, it is, but so what? They don't have to take a slightly different shift from talking. They got pills. And if they don't, there's enough out there in the woods. Go down there and check with some Indians in Brazil. But I'm sure they got enough drugs now. That's just a known fact. That they could stop. Everybody, psychiatrist's office could be cleaned out tomorrow through drugs. Through drugs. And they're not. Why? Back to where we were talking about. Nothing works. But, and see, I'm pointing that out. Let's assume that that is correct, which it is. That there are drugs right now other than just what's known as ordinary treatable. At least a psychiatrist will leave you on the street, won't have you committed, and just bring you to his office. Just ordinary, middle class, psychological problems like every civilized person has nowadays. Not anybody worth the title of civilized. If you don't have any, by God, shape up. Shape up, or I started to say come down here, but don't come down here. So nothing works. But what I want you to see is nothing's supposed to work. And it can sound like, once we bring it out this way, it can sound sort of obvious, and it almost sounds as though it is a form of social criticism, if not sarcastic humor, to point out religion doesn't work, it never has worked. By its own admission. Let it state the name of the game. Let it state what the goal is, what the rules are. Let it have at it. Okay. Now notice, it doesn't work. And we got 2,000 years to prove it, 5,000. But I can do it with economics, meteorology, all academics, and psychiatry. That doesn't work. Peniology, any social program, any governmental program, anything in the civilized world that has legs, if the show is surviving and still bringing in a crowd, the thing does not work. You read the marquee and it says, come here and see such and such show, and you go in, and it's not that show. And you complain, you and 50% of the audience, another 50%, plus all the people on stage say, well, you don't like it, get out, we'll whip your ass. Then you can get in a fight, and they can throw you out and then be arrested, or you can sue them. You do all that, and it takes up 20 years, and somebody says, you know that show you went in and paid the money? You go, and so it's the time you got in the fight. It's what started all this, and you end up in jail, and then you sued the guy. Oh, yeah, that. Did I hear that show wasn't what it was purported to be?
No.
Well, yeah, it does seem like it wasn't exactly. I guess that's how I got upset. Or somebody next to me got. Do you understand? That the whole thing, that it didn't work, that the show was not what it purported to be, is of no great consequence. I mean, it doesn't take a boy genius to point out that psychiatry doesn't work. Psychiatrists will admit it. They wouldn't care for that kind of term. They wouldn't say, well, it doesn't work. It's just that, it's an art. It is a profession. We must practice it. We hone our skills. We get better at what we do as we go along. And this kid says, well, I heard they got a drug that'll cure what that woman's been paying you 10 years, $200 a day. I read in the magazine, New England such and such journal, that they got a pill to cure that. Son, are you a psychiatrist? No. I spent 12 years in school at Harvard, blah, 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 and I have been in the practice now for 10 years, 20 years. And you walk in off the street and tell me that they have I've read about that, but you don't know what you're talking about. So all that sounds easy enough to say, well, that just shows everyone is susceptible to being pointed out there naked, that they're incompetent. Skip all that. I made it easy for you. Nothing works. But a little bit more refined is the fact. Back to this item. If man faced the obviousness of point-blank reality, if they faced it, that if what we're describing is just obvious, and you just see it, if you can do it with sans any rancor and any criticism, you just realize that, yeah, the civilized world does not work, and you begin to see why. That there's nothing amiss, but in the sense that it does not work, that nothing can fulfill its own stated aim. If men faced the obviousness of point-blank reality too easily, the necessary game of progress would end too quickly. Can you also see where ideas for other reasons of conspiracies come from? Because once you just simply realize that nothing works, because if it worked, then it is suicidal. I know that we've been through that very quickly many, many times, but now look at, in the parade, the game of progress. The game would be over if what we're discussing tonight is a valid description, which it is so valid it makes the word valid just go makes valid won't go to hide its head. That nothing works. Anything you name in the civilized world. Eating works, screwing works, sleeping works, but nothing else works. Not in the sense, if you're sleepy, again, if you're sane and ordinary, if you're sleepy and you lay down and sleep and get up, can you say that sleep didn't work? If you're hungry and you eat food and you eat enough that your stomach reaches that point, can you go, boy, food, what a waste. What a letdown. But when you get past that level, having to do with the entertainment, the food, the survival of the body, past that, nothing works. But once you realize that, then you realize where the idea of conspiracies come from, for one thing. That ordinary people go, they'll end up with just, in level one conspiracy, having to do with government or banking or religion or something. Like, hey, this is some kind of trick because it doesn't work and they're trying to fool us. All the kinds of things that we were talking about tonight and have in the past. Back to the item. If men could see the obviousness, if men just simply saw that in the intellectual world, nothing works because it's not supposed to work, and just to say nothing works is kind of a little jar, a hard way of putting it. You could put it in a nicer sense, but who's got time to worry about that? Then it wouldn't be as point blank. Nothing works. And once you realize that, then you also realize that men cannot see that too easily. Now, we can say that there's a kind of progress. We can intellectually. We can say that men are not as many men are as distracted, which is entertained. It's not that was wrong, but I have to put it, since we're always dealing with the dichotomous function of words, that sounds as though it's some sort of criticism, and it's not. But not as many people are as any longer entertained by ideas of gods as it used to be. So we can call that a kind of progress. And it's not because there's anything wrong with religion, it's just change. Remember, Life asked me to make that announcement the other night, and I did. That any of you, anyone who takes real exception, cannot handle the word progress anytime it's used, Life said to tell you to feel quite free to just substitute the word change instead of progress. So, you can always look, and if you don't like progress, see, because when I say progress, the reason I was doing that, it makes anything that you then speak of sound as though it needed to be improved upon, like religion. Because if you say, well, less people are religious now than used to be, then to your mind, even if you're trying not to be partisan about it, your mind registered it as some kind of qualitative judgment. That if we're saying progress, it means that men should not have been as religious. But I also say people do not eat as many toads now as they used to. People do not want. There's the key. They don't want to eat as many toads as they used to. Or not as many of our public officials are now wearing women's underwear as used to, except, of course, in the motherland. At least members of Parliament. See, anything you say, the inference, the mind immediately says, well, you're saying by progress, so that's why I said you can put in change. But the change, let's just pick out one. The psychiatry is not supposed to work. Let's just use that. Then the progress would be, not that there's anything wrong with psychiatry. Always remember that, or else I wouldn't waste time with that kind of important hand gesture. That there's nothing wrong. I mean, It's obvious what that means. That there was nothing wrong, but it's changing. And so that sounds to be progress, and just fight the temptation. You've got to be able to think past 2, remember, to ever get anywhere anyway. So just take into account, that's the mind, as soon as it hears something, it's like mashes the $2 thing on the cash register, goes bing, so all right, do that and just forget it. And then you try to press on and get your hand under the drawer where they keep the big bills. So it sounds as though there was something wrong, but there's not. But let's say that psychiatry now no longer has as much faith in talking analysis as it used to. Okay? And let's say that that is good change, that that is progress. It's neither here nor there, but let's say that is, okay? So it's gradually getting better, getting more refined. But what if how come then man can't just say, if I'm correct, that psychiatry will never fulfill its purported aim? Whatever it states its aim is, no matter how it changes, it'll never do it. If that be true, then why can't man see that just immediately? Why does it take hundreds, thousands of years to make little teensy-weensy progress or change? I just answered it. You could also say, if you wanted to really be dastardly, and I bet some of you got the guts for it, that again is one of the striking distinctions between ordinary people and a mystic. Because ordinary people are forced to participate and put up with the parade as it goes. They don't look at it that way, but the kinds of things, pictures and allegories I've been using, that they're satisfied as long as they can bitch about it. They got no other choice. And a mystic, the distinction is, he wants to see the end of the parade now. He wants to see where it's going. Nobody else does. Because if they did, if we could stretch reality like this without snapping back and hurting us all, if they did, it would be suicidal. Their game would be over too quickly. That would be the wild duck shot. That'd be the dream gone. That'd be everybody dressed up in the emperor's new clothes along with him. And suddenly somebody go, you realize you ain't got anything on? They go, oh, that's kind of the end of it. Or what if the purpose of life, what if there is no purpose to life? And here it is, we have all the sane people in the world, one way or the other, consider that as one of the important questions. And they deal with it on the basis of social drinking, social drug taking, religion, talking about politics. And what if you said, wait a minute, there's somebody that knows the answer, somebody that knows the purpose of life. If in some way, I know this gets sticky, but you follow, it couldn't work, but if in some way you could make ordinary people, if they said, you mean there's somebody really knows? And they go, yeah. And in some way you're telling them, and you could sense some kind of mystical vibration that struck them, just ordinary sane people, that's true. Maybe you point to somebody and you say, that guy there, I brought him here, he knows the purpose of life. And at first everybody go, because they have to. They go, come on. And you go, he does. And in some way you could put out some kind of secret mystical message, ooh, vibrations, and you made them realize he does. They don't know how, but you just made them realize he does. Think about this. Now all got quiet, all of humanity. And you're like, well, do you want me to have him speak? What would people do? Now, if they were just convinced, they don't know why and they don't know what he's going to say, but they're convinced, he can tell you the purpose of life. He can tell you where life's going. And they, in some way, could be made. It just struck them without any doubt that he does. He could tell us. And you went, Are you sure there'd be any sane takers? That is one of those things impossible to deal with, but I bring it up not to make some funny picture or to pose an unanswerable question, because it just shows you again the nature of the parade of progress, the game of progress. But if people too easily saw the obviousness of point-blank reality, then too quickly would the parade be over. They simply would. What else have you got to see? Or people, everyone thinks they want to know what happens after death. I assume you caught the same connection if you had this guy here and so, all right, he can tell you exactly what happens right after you die. He knows. He doesn't. Let's skip all that, he does. And you went, ooh, and made him realize he does. Now we have people that spend thousands of their money, their dollars, all the effort that humanity has made, all the books, all the dreams about life after death. It's been going for as long as we've got written history. And here's a guy that knows. And it strikes you, yeah, he does know. Some way you're made to know. He can tell you right now. He can tell you exactly. He can tell you without any doubt what happens right after you die. What happens after death. Are you sure they're being takers? The people would know what to do, of course, on the individual level. But now back to the idea that man cannot see. Or if they did see the obviousness, our point-blank reality. If they could see that in the man-civilized world nothing works. If they simply saw it. Of course, they saw that, they'd be real close to the secret of life or what happens after death and all that. It gets all too very close to the same kind of chicken roost. But if men saw that, then the game of progress would be over too quickly. And so the idea that you can, or that ordinary people, very sane, very intellectual, educated people by city ordinary standards, continually critique man, continually find fault with the slow progress of man. How come we can't speed this up? And of course, those same people, you could grab them if it proved anything and go, how come you can't see what's going on? Then they'd have to say, I'm a professional critic. Who are you, kid? That kind of thing. But you understand that there is a valid basis for ordinary people saying the progress of humanity is far too slow. There's a basis for it from their view. That's half of the dance team at any particular time. That's half of the people in the parade. But if it went fast, if you could suddenly take wherever it's going, well, let's assume that there is some finite end to the game of progress, to the parade of progress vis-a-vis man. And we took the film and we suddenly speeded up. Everybody goes, and we ran to the end, and you showed it to people. What would you have left after that? Again, the ordinary mind cannot conceive of it. But if you did that, I'll answer it for you. There would be no further possible entertainment for the mind. That would be the end of the parade. But the ordinary mind takes the end to be a destination, a desirable point. It'd be the end. There is a difference. Can't resist throwing in. It's of no great consequence, but again, it's just to show you that operationally, reality is always in front of you. These are anomalies I'm about to point out. But the point is, they're there and you've heard of them and took no note of it. People who undergo many times great shocks, either in warfare or undergo some tragedy, or they're in a plane crash and all their family is wiped out, and they seem to lose the will to live. This gets real iffy and you got to be good to hear it, because ordinarily they then fall out of the mainstream. But you know what they're exhibiting without knowing it? Is I've almost seen the end of the parade. Not that they understand it, but the kind of descriptions that other ordinary people give them, their friends or psychiatrists or neighbors say, well, I don't know, since that happened, she or he they seem to lose the will to live. And then they try to explain it like the family, her husband, her children, that was her whole life, and that's very close to what I'm pointing out. Nobody wants to see the end of the parade. Individuals can't deal with it. They could not answer yea or nay. They would answer, yeah, I do want to see, if they weren't confronted with a sure and certain knowledge that this guy over here can tell you. Notwithstanding that, they'll say, sure, I want to know. Why do you think I go to church? Why do you think I read books on spiritual matters, metaphysical matters? Why do you think I call a psychic whenever I can afford it? Because I do want to know. What I'm telling you, it's not exactly, but you either see it or you don't get a whiff of it. When that kind of thing happens and people seem to lose the will to live, it's very similar to them, as far as they can handle it, have seen the end of the parade. That they do, in a sense, lose the will to live. It's like they just figure, screw all this. That people even say she was religious. She was faithfully attended every week. And now she never goes to church. Never goes to temple. She never mentions God. She never mentions anything. It's not just lost the will to live. It's like the person's almost decided life is a joke. A bad joke. Whatever. I hate to keep putting words, because the more words you put on it, the more you can weasel out of it. The mind goes, But it's just the people who almost become moot and mute. in a very crude sense, they have operationally almost since the end of the parade. And look what it did to them. That's ordinary people. But do you see, the opening one tonight was that if you can think the unthinkable, one of two things happens to you. You'd either go crazy, such as this person did, because they didn't intend to, but in a sense they're thinking the unthinkable. That the situation I made up, some man or woman, that their whole family is wiped out instantly, and before that they were strictly good, middle-class citizens, religious, patriotic, upright, honest, and just like that, they're done for. They just turn into something else. In a sense, they have thought the unthinkable. They've been faced with it. They didn't choose to, they didn't want to, but they, in a sense, have seen the end of the parade. Yeah, life, yeah. So the opening, if you recall, the opening item tonight said, if you can think the unthinkable, one of two things happens. You either go crazy, or you'll stop it, which is what most people do, or you become a mystic. And then there was that little tagline that, yeah, I know it's three, but you also know mystics don't count, which has been, as you recall, a temporarily running gag line the last few collections of items. But if you can think the unthinkable, you would then fit the qualification I was trying to give you a distinction between the ordinary that they are faced with. It's to their advantage. They don't want otherwise. They're faced with running at the same speed as the parade. That is, running at the same speed of reality during their lifetime. It is the comfort of thinking what everybody else thinks. Even if you dislike what they think, if you're criticizing it, you're still thinking what they think. That is, you can say, well, I do not believe in my whole environment, political and otherwise. I am now living in the rotten egg environment. Our whole generation is a rotten egg generation. And so you spend all your life doing this. You do understand you're living the same reality. You can say, if you're ordinary, you can say, no, I'm not. You've got posters. You march after work every day, crying out against the rotten egg environment of our generation. You do understand you're in the same parade. You're just a critic of it. You're spending half your time doing this. That is not thinking the unthinkable. But if you could think the unthinkable on purpose, you'd either go crazy, stop doing it, or become a mystic. And that would be the difference in the distinction I was trying to give. The ordinary people are faced with, they want to, they don't analyze it, they want to stay in the parade. They want to stay sane. They want to keep dealing with what everyone thinks. Collective reality at their time, even if they're a critic of it. That's the comfort. That is reality. That is being sane and ordinary. The great distinction is a mystic is somebody, if you take away this distinction, or you take away the definition that they're not crazy, which the ordinary can always lump them into that, but if you ever become a mystic and you don't say anything, they can't prove it. Little free tip. Just don't ever say anything. Refuse to take any test, don't ever mention it, and they can't prove it. But if you did talk, you'd be nuts. But here's the thing. See, everyone else has got to, they want to, deal with the parade at the speed at which it's going. Even if they bitch about it. No. Even if they bitch about humanity is still too much of an uncivilized beast. I may be living here in the most civilized, economically advanced country in the world, and still look at the murder rate, look at the number of rapes going on, look at the way we treat the poor people, whatever it is, that progress is going too slow. They are still satisfied, even though they maybe complain. You understand? They are satisfied because they are marching in that parade at that tempo. Mm-hmm. A mystic, once he knows what he's doing, does fit the qualification of being, my qualification tonight, if you see it, of being insane. That doesn't even cover it. That word should go away and hide with, what was the other one? A valid. Deranged. Well, that sounds a little bit better. It's really the same, but it sounds better. Deranged. A mystic wants to see the end of the parade now. Which if I started off with that or made some kind of public lecture, I could get all sorts of people who go, well, hey, I do too. That's why I'm here. I want that kind of transcendental, that great understanding. But if I explain a little bit more, like we've been talking the last 50 minutes, they go, no. If they heard it all, they go, no. Wait a minute. If you do know, you're right. I don't see them parade. I hear what you're saying. That would ruin, what is that? Ruins life. Ruin, you go with valid and insane. They just don't want to do it. If they had any glimpse, if they had any sensation of what I'm describing, they go, no, you're right. I don't see them parade. Because then that'd be correct, because it would just, if it did not physically kill them, which that'd be the easy way out. They would turn into my kind of person that underwent some great shock and just lost the will to live, and yet sit there or stand there or stagger around for another 20 or 30 years, and it's pitiful. You may have seen somebody like that, and it's just, and they literally have lost, they seem to have no reason to live, and yet the body keeps going. I mean, what more horrible fate, could you wish on somebody? But a mystic, he is somebody that insists, not publicly, not once you know what you're doing, because you know then you can get in trouble. Yeah, you just have to put up with unprofitable inconveniences, like them making you wear coats that, strapped in all kinds of drugs, trying to force feed you drugs that you didn't want, or at least at times at which you didn't particularly want to take them. But the distinction, and he knows it, and I'm hoping some of you tonight see where I'm pointing. He wants to see the end of the parade now. No. And regardless, other people might start off, if that was the opening of some lecture, and go, well, me too. If that's what the lecture's about, let's hear it. They don't hear it. And they could probably, many of them, see what we've been talking about, that, well, you're right. If that's what would happen, you're right. I don't hear. I would not want to lose the will to live, because if you did show them in the parade, and I'm not telling you what it is, but if you told them what it was, you've taken away every reason to get up and live tomorrow. Even if people that say, well, the only reason I get up every day is because I got the red ass and I'm just so pissed off about things. Well, at least it gets them up in the morning. Half the people in the parade's got to be kind of irritated about it. So, they're fulfilling a good job. Unless they wander out into the areas of psychotic hostility, I guess they'd call it. But just your run-of-the-mill old sorehead, hell, half the parade at any given time's a sorehead. So, they would not want to know. But a mystic wants to know now. Is the tape out? Probably a good thing. Yes. I might slip up and tell. That's the thing about it, you can't slip up and tell. Maybe you can, maybe I'm lying to you. Well, why would I do that? Wait a minute. If you can't slip up and tell, then I could say you could and you wouldn't know the difference anyway. But if I say that somebody that knows can't slip up and tell, then that means I don't want to think about it.